We begin the day with the dream or the nightmare that the world woke up to today. In an astonishing victory, Republican Donald Trump has become the 45th president-elect of the United States. A blistering campaign against Democrat Hillary Clinton culminated last night in her brutal defeat. For Europe, Trump's rise to power sets off alarm bells that have been silent for 70 years. For the first time since before World War II, Americans have put in power a candidate who questions the global order dependent on a superpower's willingness to intervene. There was no hint of allies or special relationships in Trump's victory speech last night.
I want to tell the world community that while we will always put America's interests first, we will deal fairly with everyone, all people and all other nations. As I've said from the beginning, ours was not a campaign, but rather an incredible and great movement made up of millions of hardworking men and women who love their country and want a better, brighter future for themselves and for their family. It's a movement comprised of Americans from all races, religions, backgrounds, and beliefs who want and expect our government to serve the people, and serve the people it will.
Last night, I congratulated Donald Trump and offered to work with him on behalf of our country. I hope that he will be a successful president for all Americans. This is not the outcome we wanted or we worked so hard for, and I'm sorry that we did not win this election for the values we share and the vision we hold for our country. But I feel pride and gratitude for this wonderful campaign that we built together. We have seen that our nation is more deeply divided than we thought. But I still believe in America, and I always will. And if you do, then we must accept this result and then look to the future. Donald Trump is going to be our president. We owe him an open mind and the chance to lead.
And that's where we are tonight. I'm joined now in the studio by Suda David-Wilp. She is from the German Marshall Fund, a familiar face here. Suda knows the players in the German Bundestag as well as inside the U.S. Congress. Suda, it's good to have you back on the show. And I'm joined from New York by Jeff Jarvis. He is an outspoken media critic and an unapologetic supporter of Hillary Clinton. It's good to see you, Jeff. And Anthony Adornato joins me from Ithaca, New York. He's a journalism professor. He's done some very interesting research into the use of fake news, especially in the political campaign that we just saw come to an end. Gentlemen, to both of you, thank you for being on the show. Suda, let me start with you. What have you heard today here in Berlin? How big is the shock of Trump's victory?
So I think most of the representatives of the established political parties, the SPD, the Greens, and the CDU from the Bundestag came out and looked visibly shocked and said that this would be a break in transatlantic relations, a break in the history of America. But of course, Chancellor Merkel, the leader that she is in the world stage, she offered a congratulations to Donald Trump that was very diplomatic. Very diplomatic.
Not so diplomatic is what we heard from someone who is on this Foreign Relations Committee in the Bundestag, Norbert Röttgen. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
And I'm very worried about this election, of course, because of the way he behaved, the way he campaigned, capitalizing and stoking hatred and anger and emotions, and making remarks by putting NATO in question or accommodating Vladimir Putin. So we are very worried here in Germany and Europe.
Very worried. I mean, is he actually giving the more accurate picture of what we're seeing in Europe with a president-elect Trump?
Absolutely. I think there are two faces of Europe. You have people like Norbert Röttgen who believe in the liberal international order and are worried because Donald Trump during the campaign trail questioned those values. Whereas you also see populists in Europe, like Geert Wilders, Marine Le Pen, who are ecstatic about Donald Trump winning the presidency.
Jeff, let me pull you in and ask you, how do you explain to your global audience and our global audience what happened yesterday? You were open on social media about your support for the Clinton campaign and all that support. I mean, none of that worked. How did that happen?
We're still in shock, and I'm not exactly sure, but I think there's a large portion of America, half of it almost, that feels they are not being heard. And as a member of the media, and let's be honest, the liberal media, I will confess that I think we ill-served that half of America. We didn't listen to them, understand their needs, empathize with them, and thus we had no trust, so that when we tried to correct them and tried to inform them, we were not able to. And this was an election made in part by people who I think went after an emotional appeal rather than a fact-based appeal.
But that's nothing new, is it?
No, but it's kind of turbocharged this time. I mean, pardon me, I hope that I don't offend when I say that we in America have to learn from Germany's history about how it's possible for someone coming in spouting a certain kind of rhetoric based around fear, based around hating others, based around protectionism, that has an emotional appeal to people whose lot in life isn't going as well as they'd like, to put it mildly. And that's what we have here. We have a populist who has come into office and used media because he was, of course, an entertainment figure, and media treated him as an entertainment figure. Media business model, loved the clickbait, as we like to say on the internet, that is Donald Trump. We have this false balance we believe in on TV where we took somebody who was extremely well qualified and someone who was quite odd and tried to treat them that were the same, which didn't serve the public at all well. It all conspired together to, I think, leave for uncivil discourse. It didn't help that Donald Trump had a Twitter account and used it to attack people and say nasty things. And that's where we were. Let
me pick up on that, too, and ask Anthony. Anthony, you've done a lot of research on the rise of fake news, especially in this campaign. Talk to me a little bit about what we saw and if we recognized fake news. And do you think it affected the outcome of the vote?
Well, I think it's no surprise that fake news on social media played a huge role in this election. If we look at what folks were sharing, even in our own news feeds on social media, particularly on Facebook, fake news coming from sites that were created just to do that, share fake news in support or against one candidate or another. And what this did for many people is it gave them affirmation in their own beliefs, but wasn't necessarily information or informing them in terms of making an informed decision. And I think that is what this election in social media really highlighted for me is where do we as a society place value on facts in order to make informed decisions? So it's become a huge problem. And unfortunately, even if people on either side realize that it may be inaccurate, it may be misinformation, they're still sharing it because it makes them feel good that it backs up how they feel about one candidate or the other.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. We had guests on our coverage, our show last night, as the results were coming in, and I interviewed a 19-year-old supporter of Trump, and I asked him about the fact that Trump had lied, according to all the reports that had been compiled. He had lied on an average about 20 times every day during the campaign, and the 19-year-old said that didn't bother him. And trying to get our heads around that, I think, is a challenge for the media. We've got an example, Anthony. Maybe you can talk us through this. A tweet by Donald Trump, if we could pull that up and take a look at it. Talk us through this. What are we looking at?
Right. What we're seeing is Donald Trump in his element, right? He's appealing to kind of these people who place value on this shock value. And this narrative has been a big part of his campaign. And I think it goes back to media literacy as well. So this needs to start in our education system very early on. When someone sees a tweet like we just saw, why should they care if it's accurate or not? Why is that important? And then what steps do they take when they see that tweet or a link to a fake news site? What steps do they take to verify that information, or at least give it a cursory scan before they end up sharing or retweeting this?
Jeff, is social media part of a problem here? I mean, do social media and democracy as we know it, can they coexist?
Oh, I think absolutely, because what social media is not an entity. It's the channel to hear the voices of the people we couldn't hear before. In a democracy, that's incredibly valuable. Now, there may be pent-up anger and frustration that we're hearing now. We may be trying to still negotiate our norms around this now. But it's incredible that anyone can now speak to the nation and to the world. Now, does that include idiots and liars? Yes, it does. But it also includes a lot of very smart and caring people. And we in media have to change our fundamental model. We can no longer expect that people will always come to us as a destination and feed off our trough and be grateful for it. We have to take our journalism into their conversations. We have to add facts and fact-checking and context and reporting to the conversations that are going on now without us. We haven't learned how to do this because we're still making the same product that we made up to 100 years ago.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. Jeff Jarvis in New York, Anthony Adonato in Ithaca, New York. To both of you gentlemen, thank you very much. We appreciate your insights and helping us understand the election that we saw yesterday. Thank you.